The rancher offered his Apache neighbor shelter. The next day she asked, "Is your offer still good?" John, a man in his late 40s, stood on the edge of his property, looking out over the fields where his cattle grazed peacefully. His ranch had been in his family for generations, and he had spent most of his life tending to it. He knew every inch of the land, every tree, and every stone. There was a quiet satisfaction in the routine, feeding the animals, checking the fences, making sure everything ran smoothly. He had grown used to the silence, the peacefulness that came with living alone in a place where neighbors were few and far between. That afternoon, John noticed something unusual in the distance. A small moving truck was slowly making its way down the dusty road that ran alongside his property. Curious, he squinted through the fading sunlight. There had been talk in the town about a new neighbor, someone moving in from the city, but John hadn't paid much attention. Change rarely came to this part of the countryside, and he preferred it that way. But seeing the truck and the figure guiding it, he felt a small spark of curiosity. By the time John approached the property line, he could see a young woman struggling with boxes and bags. She moved with determination, but the effort of lifting and carrying her belongings was obvious. She had long, dark hair tied back loosely, and her movements were careful and deliberate, as if she didn't want to disturb anything around her. Her clothes were practical and worn from travel, and there was a quiet strength in the way she handled herself. John realized she was likely the new neighbor he had heard about. He called out a friendly greeting, careful not to startle her. "Hello there. Need a hand with those?" The young woman paused and turned toward him. Her eyes were cautious but polite. "Oh, thank you, but I think I've got it," she said. Her voice was calm, with a hint of firmness that suggested she was used to taking care of herself. John nodded, respecting her independence, but he couldn't help offering again. "All right, but if you need anything, just let me know. I live just over there." He gestured toward his ranch house, a sturdy structure surrounded by fencing and grazing land. She gave a small, polite smile, nodding her head slightly. "I appreciate that," she said softly. "I'm Elena." "John," he replied, extending a hand in greeting. They shook hands briefly, a simple gesture that carried more weight than words. There was an unspoken understanding between them. Two people, both strong in their own ways, meeting for the first time under ordinary circumstances that already carried the possibility of connection. Elena returned to her task, carefully arranging boxes and supplies near her small cabin. John watched her for a moment, admiring the quiet determination she showed. She seemed cautious, as if measuring the world around her and deciding how much to trust it. He remembered a time when he had first started on the ranch, facing challenges alone, learning to handle everything without anyone to guide him. He could respect that in her, and it reminded him of himself when he was younger. The town had been whispering about people moving in from the city, and there were always a few who looked at newcomers with suspicion. John had heard some of the neighbors mention the young woman, speculating about who she was and why she had chosen to live so far away from the comforts of urban life. But John wasn't interested in gossip. He preferred to form his own opinions, based on what he saw with his own eyes. And what he saw was someone working hard to establish herself, someone determined to make a life in a place that could be harsh and unforgiving to those unprepared for it. As the sun lowered further, a cool breeze swept across the fields, rustling the leaves and carrying the faint scent of earth and livestock. John realized that the day was ending, and soon the night would fall. The thought of the long night ahead made him glance toward Elena's cabin once more. He wondered if she had everything she needed to be comfortable and safe. The cabin looked small, modest, and not entirely equipped for the sudden changes that could come with the weather in this region. Without overstepping, John decided to offer a gesture of goodwill. "Elena," he said, calling her name gently. She looked up, wiping her hands on a cloth. If you ever need a place to stay, especially if a storm comes through, my door is open. You don't have to hesitate." Elena paused for a moment, taking in his words. She looked at him, studying the sincerity in his eyes. It was not the kind of offer given lightly, and she could sense the authenticity in his voice. She nodded politely, but she did not accept immediately. "Thank you, John. That's very kind of you. I'll keep it in mind." John nodded, understanding her hesitation. He had learned over the years that pride and independence were important, and sometimes people needed time to feel comfortable accepting help. "That's fine. Just remember, it's there if you need it." He gave a small, encouraging smile before turning back toward his ranch, leaving her to continue her work. Elena watched him walk away, her mind occupied with the weight of moving to a new place. She had chosen to leave the city for a reason, a desire to start fresh, to live closer to nature, to create a life where she could be self-reliant. Accepting help was not easy for her. It went against the independence she had worked so hard to maintain. Yet, something about John's offer lingered in her thoughts, a small comfort in the uncertainty of her new life. As she finished arranging her belongings, she took a moment to step outside and breathe in the crisp evening air. The ranch stretched endlessly around her, a vast canvas of open land, hills, and trees. It was beautiful, but it was also daunting. Living alone here would require strength, patience, and resilience, qualities she hoped she possessed in abundance. John returned to his routines, feeding the cattle and checking the fences one more time before dusk. Yet, he couldn't entirely shake the thought of Elena. Something about her presence, quiet but strong, had left an impression. He admired her determination and her effort to stand on her own. Perhaps, he thought, she would need more than just good intentions to navigate life here. But for now, he had made his offer, a simple gesture of kindness that might mean more than he realized. Night fell over the ranch, stars beginning to twinkle in the vast, clear sky. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the promise of change and new beginnings. Both John and Elena retired for the evening, their thoughts lingering on each other and the unspoken connection that had begun to form. One had offered shelter without expectation, and the other had acknowledged it with cautious gratitude. It was a small act, almost invisible in the grand sweep of life, yet it held the potential to grow into something meaningful. In the quiet of the night, John reflected on the life he had built, a life of solitude, routine, and care for the land. He had always believed that strength came from independence, from facing challenges alone. But now, watching the distant glow of Elena's cabin, he wondered if there was also strength in reaching out, in offering support without being asked. It was a thought that would stay with him as he drifted off to sleep, the beginning of a story that neither of them could yet imagine. Elena, too, lay awake for a while, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the rustle of leaves, the faint creak of her cabin settling in the cool night air. She thought about the stranger who had offered her shelter, a man she barely knew, yet whose gesture had felt genuine. In a world where kindness was often hard to find, this small act stood out. She wondered if she should accept it someday, if circumstances required it. For now, she held the memory of his words close, a reassurance in the quiet darkness. The night passed gently, and with it, the first chapter of their story quietly concluded. It was a chapter not marked by dramatic events or loud declarations, but by simple, human gestures, the awareness of another person, the offering of help, and the consideration of a neighbor's well-being. It was a beginning, subtle and unassuming, yet full of potential. As dawn approached, painting the horizon with soft hues of pink and gold, both John and Elena awoke with the knowledge that life on the ranch would continue, but now with the presence of someone new nearby. The events of the day and the offer of shelter, simple as it was, had laid the foundation for a connection that neither of them could yet predict. It was a reminder that even in places where life seemed solitary and routine, There was always room for human connection, understanding, and kindness, a lesson both of them would carry forward in the days to come. The morning after the first meeting, John woke to the sound of birds chirping softly outside his window. The sun had just begun to rise, spilling golden light over the ranch. The day seemed calm at first, but the weather forecast on his old radio warned of an approaching storm. It was unusual for this time of year, and he knew from experience that storms in these parts could turn dangerous very quickly. John immediately started preparing his ranch. He moved quickly, securing the barn doors, checking the fences, and making sure the cattle were safely gathered in the corrals. The wind was picking up already, rustling the leaves of the tall trees surrounding the property. He could see dark clouds forming on the horizon, rolling slowly yet ominously toward him. There was a sense of urgency in the air, and he knew that anyone living alone, without experience, could face serious trouble if the storm hit at full force. As he worked, John's thoughts turned to Elena, his new neighbor. He remembered the way she had carried herself, the quiet determination in her movements. She seemed strong and capable, yet he also knew that living alone, especially in a remote area with no family or friends nearby, could make her vulnerable in situations like this. Her small cabin looked modest, and from what he had seen, it might not withstand a powerful storm without some preparation. By mid-morning, the clouds had thickened, dark and heavy. The wind had grown stronger, causing the loose branches to sway dangerously. John paused for a moment, watching the approaching storm, then glanced toward Elena's cabin in the distance. She was outside, moving quickly but with purpose, trying to secure what she could. He noticed her dragging sandbags toward her front door and tying down tarps over sections of the roof. She was methodical, yet the storm was coming faster than she could possibly prepare for. John knew he could not intervene directly without seeming intrusive, but he decided to check from a distance to make sure she was okay. He climbed onto the old tractor and drove slowly down the dirt road, keeping a careful eye on her. She looked up as he approached and gave a small nod, acknowledging him without stopping her work. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the careful attention in her movements. She was trying to handle everything herself, but he could sense the fatigue building. "Looks like it's going to be a big one," he called out, raising his voice over the growing wind. Elena paused briefly, then replied, "I know. I've got to do what I can." Her voice was calm but carried a hint of worry. It was clear that she was doing her best, but storms like this were unpredictable, and there was only so much one person could manage alone. John parked the tractor a safe distance away and decided to prepare his own home for the storm while keeping an eye on her. He knew that the night would be long and the situation could become serious if the storm intensified. He reinforced doors and windows, moved fragile items to safer places, and ensured there was enough food and water stocked. Despite all this, his mind kept returning to Elena. He remembered the polite but hesitant way she had refused his previous offer of shelter. Now, he realized that the offer could mean the difference between safety and danger. As the afternoon progressed, the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. They were not yet strong, just a light patter on the roof, but it was enough to remind John of the storm's growing intensity. The wind howled through the trees, bending branches and rattling fences. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by the deep rumble of thunder that echoed across the hills. Elena continued her efforts outside, despite the rain soaking her clothes. She tied down loose boards, covered supplies with tarps, and double-checked the structure of her cabin. The wind was becoming stronger, forcing her to hold onto the doors and furniture to prevent them from shifting. She was determined not to ask for help, but the storm was beginning to push her limits. Each gust seemed stronger than the last, and the clouds above churned in dark, angry swirls. John watched from his property, his concern growing. He could see her struggle, the effort she was putting into securing everything. He knew that if the storm grew worse, her small cabin might not be enough to protect her from the elements. Despite her independence, he realized that sometimes even the strongest people needed help. The thought made him reconsider his earlier offer. Perhaps now was the time to remind her that she didn't have to face the storm alone. By late afternoon, the storm had reached full force. Rain poured down in sheets, and the wind howled like an animal across the open fields. Trees swayed dangerously, and the sound of splintering branches added to the tension. John could barely see the road leading to Elena's cabin, but he knew she was still out there, trying to protect her home. Every instinct told him to go to her, to offer shelter without hesitation. He climbed back onto the tractor, determined to get to her. The muddy path made it difficult to drive, but he moved carefully, his eyes constantly scanning for any signs of trouble. As he approached, he could see Elena struggling with a tarp that had come loose, her hands slippery from rain. A gust of wind nearly knocked her off her feet, and John felt a surge of urgency. He jumped down and ran toward her, calling out, "Elena, come with me." "It's not safe out here," she hesitated, pride and independence battling with the fear in her eyes. She wanted to finish securing her home, but the wind and rain were relentless. Finally, she nodded, realizing that she could not withstand the storm alone. John helped her to the tractor and guided her back toward his ranch. The ride was tense, the rain soaking them both, but they finally reached the safety of his house. Inside, John quickly led her to a warm, dry room. He handed her towels to dry off and offered hot coffee and blankets. She accepted, grateful but still quiet, her pride intact but her relief evident. For the first time since they had met, the two of them shared a space of safety together, away from the chaos of the storm outside. As they settled in, John watched the rain lash against the windows, realizing how fragile life could be in the face of nature's power. Elena, now sitting with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, finally allowed herself a small sigh of relief. She looked at John and said softly, I guess your offer really was good." John smiled gently. "I told you it was there if you needed it. Sometimes we all need a little help, even the strongest of us." They spent the next few hours talking quietly, listening to the storm rage outside. John learned more about Elena's past, her struggles in the city, her desire for independence, and her decision to move to the countryside. Elena discovered more about John as well, his dedication to the ranch, the quiet solitude he had grown used to, and the value he placed on helping others without expecting anything in return. Through the storm, a bond began to form between them. It was subtle at first, built on shared experience, trust, and understanding. They realized that strength did not mean facing challenges alone. Sometimes it meant knowing when to accept help. The storm, with all its intensity and chaos, became a backdrop for this connection to grow, a reminder that life often brings unexpected tests that reveal the best in people. By late evening, the storm showed signs of easing. Rain still fell steadily, but the wind began to die down and the dark clouds slowly started to part. Outside, the world was wet and wild, but inside John's house, there was warmth, safety, and a growing sense of companionship. Elena looked around, appreciating the quiet comfort she had found, and for the first time she felt that maybe moving here had been the right decision. John, too, reflected on the events of the day. His offer, made almost casually days before, had become something meaningful. It had reminded him that kindness, even in small gestures, had the power to change someone's life. He realized that the act of helping someone in need could bring not only relief, but also connection, understanding, and respect. As night fell, the storm finally passed, leaving the land drenched and glistening under the moonlight. Both John and Elena prepared for the night, grateful for the safety and shelter they had found together. They had faced the storm, and through it, a new chapter of their lives had begun. one built on trust, shared experiences, and the quiet knowledge that reaching out to others could bring strength, comfort, and even friendship. The events of this day would remain with them both, a reminder that life's challenges often arrive unexpectedly, but so do opportunities for connection and compassion. And sometimes the simplest offers, like a safe place to stay during a storm, could become the foundation for something truly meaningful. The morning after the storm had passed, the ranch looked completely transformed. The fields, once golden and dry, were now soaked with water, glistening under the soft morning sun. Puddles had formed along the dirt roads, and the once gentle stream near John's property had grown wider and faster from the heavy rainfall. The scent of wet earth filled the air, a mixture of freshness and the lingering intensity of the storm from the night before. John stepped outside, taking in the scene. The ranch had survived the storm well thanks to his preparation, but the signs of nature's power were evident everywhere. As John inspected the land, checking the fences and the barn once more, his thoughts turned to Elena. She had faced the storm alone in her small cabin, and while he knew she was strong, the thought of her braving the storm on her own worried him. He remembered her cautious smile the day they had first met, and the polite, hesitant way she had accepted his offer in theory, but not in practice. Her pride and independence were admirable, but sometimes they could be dangerous. He decided that today he would make sure she truly knew she wasn't alone if she needed help. A few hours later, he noticed movement near her cabin. Elena was outside, inspecting her property carefully. The rain had stopped, but the land was muddy, and small branches and debris from the storm were scattered everywhere. She moved with a sense of determination, carefully picking up fallen branches and examining areas of the roof that might have been damaged. John watched from a distance, impressed by her resilience but also aware of how tiring it must have been for her. Finally, he called out gently, "Elena, are you all right?" Elena looked up, her hair damp from the morning dew, and gave a small, polite smile. "I'm fine, John. Just making sure everything's okay after last night." John nodded, walking closer, mindful of the muddy ground. "You handled the storm well, but your cabin, it might not be the safest place if another storm comes. I just want to make sure you know my offer still stands." Elena hesitated for a moment, glancing down at the muddy ground before meeting his eyes. Pride and independence battled with practicality. She wanted to manage on her own, to prove that she could survive without relying on anyone. But the memory of the storm's force, the power of the wind and rain battering her small cabin, reminded her that sometimes it was wise to accept help. She took a deep breath and said quietly, "John, is your offer really still good?" John smiled warmly, relieved that she had finally asked. "Absolutely. Anytime you need shelter or just a safe place to wait out the weather, you're welcome." A sense of relief washed over Elena. It wasn't easy for her to admit that she needed help, but she knew that in this situation it was the smart and safe choice. She nodded, grateful for his understanding and patience. "Thank you," she said softly. I think I'd like to take you up on that, at least for today." John led her back toward his ranch house, careful to avoid the slippery patches along the way. They walked side by side, not speaking much, but the silence between them was comfortable, filled with mutual respect. Both were aware of each other's strength, independence, and determination, yet both understood the value of accepting support when necessary. Inside the house, John offered her a warm towel to dry off and a seat near the fireplace. The room was cozy, with the faint smell of wood smoke lingering from the morning fire. Elena wrapped herself in the towel, grateful for the warmth and comfort after the exhausting hours spent outside. John prepared coffee for both of them, the rich aroma filling the room. It was a simple gesture, but it carried with it a sense of care and attentiveness that Elena appreciated deeply. As they sat by the fire, the conversation turned naturally to the events of the storm. John listened as Elena recounted her experience, how she had tried to secure the cabin, how the wind had nearly blown her off her feet, and how she had struggled to manage everything alone. She spoke with honesty and clarity, not exaggerating or complaining, simply sharing what had happened. John nodded, understanding the challenges she faced. "You did well out there, Elena. Not many people could have handled it as calmly and efficiently as you did." Elena smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and modesty. "I had to," she said. "There wasn't anyone else to help me." John looked at her, realizing how much courage it took for her to face the storm alone, and how much it still took to ask for help now. "It's okay to accept help sometimes," he said gently. "It doesn't make you weak. It just means you're wise enough to know when to rely on others." Elena considered his words carefully. She had spent most of her life proving her independence, often refusing assistance even when it would have made things easier. But here, in this quiet house, warmed by fire and coffee, she felt a shift. She realized that accepting help didn't diminish her strength. It was simply a recognition that everyone, no matter how capable, needed support at times. As the day progressed, the storm outside faded into memory, leaving behind a landscape transformed by the rain. Puddles shimmered in the sunlight, and the fresh scent of earth and grass filled the air. John suggested that they inspect the damage together, not just on his property but also near her cabin, to ensure everything was safe. Elena agreed, grateful for the offer of company. Walking back toward her cabin, they worked side by side. John helped lift heavier debris and secure loose boards, while Elena guided him to areas that needed attention. There was a rhythm to their teamwork, a silent understanding that each could rely on the other without words. It was a new experience for both of them, trusting someone else while maintaining their own sense of responsibility and strength. During this time, they also began to share stories about their lives. John spoke of his experiences growing up on the ranch, the challenges of maintaining the land, and the satisfaction of seeing it thrive year after year. Elena spoke of her life in the city, the reasons she had left, and her desire for a fresh start in a place where she could feel connected to nature and her own sense of independence. The more they talked, the more they discovered common ground. Both valued hard work, honesty, and respect for others. Both understood the importance of resilience, yet both also realized that life's challenges were easier to face with someone willing to stand beside you when necessary. By the time they finished securing her cabin, a quiet friendship had begun to form, built on shared experiences, trust, and mutual respect. Returning to John's house, they spent the remainder of the afternoon drying off, warming up, and sharing a simple meal. The atmosphere was relaxed, filled with a sense of relief and camaraderie. Outside, the wind had calmed completely, and the sun shone brightly, reflecting off the wet land. The storm that had brought uncertainty and fear the day before now seemed like a distant memory, leaving only the lessons learned, and the connection forged between two people who had faced it together. As evening approached, John and Elena sat by the fire once more, talking quietly. Elena expressed her gratitude not just for the shelter, but for the understanding and respect John had shown. "Thank you, John," she said sincerely. "I didn't realize it could feel so good to accept help." John smiled, feeling a quiet satisfaction. "We all need help sometimes. It's part of being human, and I'm glad you trusted me enough to accept it." The day ended peacefully, with a sense of accomplishment and safety. Both John and Elena had faced challenges and learned from them. They had discovered that strength wasn't about doing everything alone, but about knowing when to accept support without losing independence or dignity. The storm had tested them both, but it had also created a bond that neither of them expected, a connection rooted in respect, understanding, and shared experience. As night fell, stars appeared in the clear sky, twinkling over the wet, glistening land. Both John and Elena reflected on the day, realizing that their lives had shifted subtly but significantly. A simple offer of shelter had led to trust and friendship, a reminder that small acts of kindness could create meaningful connections. The events of the day, the storm, and the choice to accept help would remain with them, forming the foundation for the next chapter of their story. In the quiet of the night, the fire crackled softly in John's house, providing warmth and light. Elena, sitting comfortably wrapped in a blanket, felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. She had come to this land seeking independence, but she realized that independence didn't mean isolation. She had found someone willing to offer help without judgment, and in doing so, she had discovered the value of trust and friendship. John, looking at her, felt a similar sense of fulfillment. He had always valued solitude, yet he now understood the joy of shared experiences, of helping someone in need, and of forming a bond based on respect and kindness. The storm had passed, but the impact it had on their lives would linger, shaping their relationship in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The day closed quietly, with both of them feeling a connection that went beyond simple neighborly courtesy. It was a bond built on mutual respect, courage, and the understanding that sometimes the greatest strength comes from accepting help and offering it in return. The next morning, the sun rose slowly, spreading warm light over the ranch and the surrounding hills. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the earthy scent of rain-soaked fields. Birds chirped energetically, as if celebrating the calm after the storm. John and Elena began their day with a quiet breakfast in the kitchen, sharing simple food and hot coffee. There was a comfortable silence between them, an unspoken understanding that the storm had created a unique bond. After breakfast, John suggested that they take a walk around the property together to assess any remaining damage. Elena agreed, grateful for the company. As they stepped outside, the sunlight reflected off puddles and the wet grass, making the landscape shimmer like a painting. The storm had left signs everywhere: broken branches, flattened patches of grass, and some minor damage to fences. Yet there was also a sense of renewal. The rain had cleaned the air, the land looked greener, and even the small stream near John's property seemed livelier and clearer. While they worked together, picking up fallen branches and repairing minor damage. John showed Elena how to check the fences for loose posts and how to secure them using the right technique to prevent future problems. She listened attentively, asking questions and practicing the skills he showed her. John was impressed by how quickly she learned and adapted. Her determination and willingness to try new things made the work not just productive, but enjoyable. As they moved along the property, John and Elena began to share more about their personal lives. John spoke of the challenges he had faced maintaining the ranch, the long hours, and the sense of pride he felt watching the land thrive year after year. Elena shared stories of her past in the city, her efforts to live independently, her struggles with people who didn't understand her, and her longing for a simpler, more connected life closer to nature. Their conversation was easy and natural, filled with mutual curiosity and respect. They laughed at small incidents from their past, and the laughter carried across the fields, blending with the sounds of birds and the rustling of leaves in the light breeze. In these moments, both realized that friendship often grew from simple, shared experiences rather than grand gestures. By mid-morning, they decided to inspect Elena's cabin more thoroughly. She wanted to ensure that no hidden damage from the storm would cause trouble later. John helped her lift a few heavy objects and stabilize the structure where needed. The teamwork was seamless. They communicated without tension, and there was a rhythm to their movements that made the work feel less like labor and more like a shared effort toward a common goal. While working, John noticed small details about Elena that he admired. The way she observed her surroundings carefully, thinking through every decision, and the way she maintained her calm and patience even when the work was difficult, showed a quiet strength that was rare. He also realized that her independence was not about being distant or stubborn, but about valuing self-reliance and personal responsibility. Elena, on the other hand, began to see John in a new light. She had always viewed him as a friendly neighbor, perhaps a bit reserved, but she now appreciated the depth of his character. His patience, kindness, and willingness to help without judgment impressed her deeply. She realized that trust was not given lightly to either of them, yet the events of the storm had allowed that trust to form naturally. As the day progressed, they took short breaks to rest and drink water. During these moments, they talked about their dreams and aspirations. Elena shared her desire to build a life that balanced independence with community, where she could feel safe but still in control of her choices. John spoke about his hope to maintain the ranch and perhaps share it with someone who could understand and respect the work involved. They discovered a shared appreciation for nature, for hard work, and for the quiet beauty of simple living. In the afternoon, John suggested that they take care of the livestock together. He showed Elena how to check the cattle for signs of stress after the storm and how to guide them safely back to the pasture. She followed his instructions carefully, moving confidently as she learned. There was a sense of accomplishment in working alongside someone who respected her abilities and encouraged her without criticism. The cattle, sensing the calm and organized energy, moved peacefully under their guidance, adding to the sense of harmony in the environment. As they completed the day's work, John and Elena sat on a fallen log near the stream, looking at the land they had cared for together. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple. There was a quiet satisfaction in the air, a feeling that the day had been productive, meaningful, and filled with connection. Neither had expected that a storm and a simple offer of shelter could lead to this sense of companionship. Elena broke the silence first. "I didn't realize how much I could enjoy working with someone else," she said softly. "I always thought I had to do everything alone to prove myself." John nodded, smiling. "Sometimes we learn that independence and teamwork aren't opposites. You can be strong and still allow others to support you. It doesn't make you less capable, it just makes life easier and more meaningful." They shared a quiet moment, watching the reflection of the sunset on the stream. The day had been filled with hard work, learning, and laughter, and both felt a growing sense of trust and understanding. The bond between them was no longer just about surviving the storm. It was about recognizing each other's strengths, appreciating their differences, and valuing the moments of cooperation that had emerged naturally. As night approached, they returned to John's house for dinner. The meal was simple but satisfying, shared in the warmth of the kitchen. They talked about lighter topics, shared small stories and jokes, and enjoyed the comfort of each other's company. The atmosphere was relaxed, and the ease with which they interacted highlighted the growing friendship between them. After dinner, they sat by the fireplace once more. The crackling fire filled the room with warmth and light, creating a safe and welcoming space. Outside, the night was calm with a clear sky full of stars. The events of the day seemed distant now, replaced by a sense of peace and contentment. Elena reflected on the past days, the storm, the offer of shelter, the shared work, and the conversations. She realized that trust was something that grew slowly, through actions rather than words. John's patience and understanding had allowed her to feel comfortable, and she was beginning to see the value of allowing herself to rely on others when needed. It was a small but significant shift in her perspective, one that would shape her life moving forward. John, too, felt the impact of their growing connection. He had always valued solitude and self-reliance, but he now understood the joy and fulfillment that came from helping someone else and forming a meaningful bond. The day had reminded him that human connections, even simple ones built on cooperation and shared experiences, were among the most rewarding aspects of life. As they prepared for bed, both felt a sense of gratitude. The storm had tested them, challenged them, and ultimately brought them together. They had learned from each other, supported each other, and discovered the importance of balance between independence and reliance, strength and vulnerability, work and connection. That night, the ranch was quiet once more. The fields shimmered under the moonlight, and the gentle sound of the stream provided a soothing backdrop. Both John and Elena drifted off to sleep with the knowledge that their lives had been touched in meaningful ways. The bond formed through shared experiences, trust, and mutual respect was still new, but it had the potential to grow into a lasting friendship. The events of the day had shown them that life's challenges, when faced together, could strengthen relationships and teach valuable lessons. It wasn't just about surviving a storm. It was about understanding, caring, and being present for one another. And in that understanding, both found a sense of comfort and hope for the days ahead. The night passed peacefully, leaving a quiet promise of new beginnings. Both John and Elena had learned that sometimes the simplest actions, offering help, accepting support, working together, could lead to the most profound connections. And as they lay in their respective rooms, the warmth of friendship and the quiet strength of mutual respect lingered, preparing them for whatever challenges or joys the future might bring. The morning after another quiet night on the ranch dawned clear and bright. The storm had passed completely, leaving behind a landscape that seemed renewed and full of life. The fields were wet, shining under the early sunlight, and the stream near John's property gurgled gently, reflecting the sky above. Birds filled the air with cheerful songs, and the scent of fresh grass and wet earth created a sense of calm and peace. John and Elena awoke, feeling a sense of satisfaction and quiet joy at having made it through the challenges of the past days together. Elena dressed quickly, pulling on her boots and jacket, ready to check her cabin and ensure that nothing had been damaged overnight. John offered to walk with her, wanting to make sure she was safe. She hesitated for a moment but then agreed, appreciating his company without needing to admit it. As they stepped outside, the sun warmed their faces, and the wind carried a light, refreshing breeze. The ranch, still damp from the storm, looked vibrant and alive. As they approached her cabin, they observed small repairs that would be necessary. Some branches had fallen across the pathway, and a corner of the roof needed additional reinforcement. Together, they began tidying the area, picking up debris, and securing the cabin. Working side by side, they moved easily and efficiently, communicating with simple words and gestures. Each action reflected growing familiarity and trust between them. There was a sense of comfort in the teamwork, a feeling that they were stronger together than apart. Elena paused for a moment, looking at the cabin. "It still feels fragile sometimes," she said softly. "I thought I could manage everything on my own, but the storm reminded me that I can't do it all by myself." John nodded, understanding completely. Independence doesn't mean doing everything alone. Sometimes it means knowing when to let someone help. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. She smiled faintly, realizing the truth in his words. Accepting help didn't mean losing control, it simply meant being smart and safe. The storm had taught her a valuable lesson about resilience, judgment, and the importance of community, even in a small and quiet way. After securing her cabin, they returned to John's ranch house to enjoy a late breakfast. The aroma of fresh coffee filled the kitchen, and the warmth from the fireplace made the space cozy and inviting. They ate quietly at first, savoring the food and the calm after days of tension and work. Then, the conversation turned naturally toward future plans. Elena spoke about her hopes for the land she now called home. She wanted to make it a place where she could feel safe, independent, and connected to nature. She also expressed interest in learning more about ranch work, eager to acquire skills that would allow her to care for her property efficiently. John listened attentively, encouraging her curiosity and sharing tips about caring for animals, maintaining fences, and tending the land. Their bond continued to strengthen as the day progressed. John showed her how to feed the cattle and check their health, demonstrating techniques with patience and care. Elena followed his instructions carefully, her confidence growing with each task. She appreciated his willingness to teach without criticism, and John admired her eagerness to learn and her careful attention to detail. Together, they moved through the ranch, accomplishing tasks while also sharing laughter and stories. By mid-afternoon, they took a break near the small stream that ran along John's property. The sunlight sparkled on the water, and the gentle sound of flowing water created a peaceful atmosphere. They sat quietly for a moment, enjoying the beauty of the landscape and the satisfaction of a productive morning. Elena broke the silence first. "I didn't expect moving here to be this meaningful," she said. "I thought I would just have peace and solitude, but I didn't realize how important it is to have someone you can trust nearby." John smiled, nodding. "Life is richer when you share it with someone who respects and understands you. Solitude is important, but connection makes it meaningful." Elena considered this, realizing that her independence and her desire for solitude didn't have to conflict with building relationships. She could maintain her freedom while also welcoming support and companionship. It was a new perspective, one that had grown naturally from the events of the past few days. As the sun began to lower toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the fields, John suggested that they finish some final tasks together before evening. They repaired a section of fence that had loosened during the storm and moved some stray equipment into the barn. Each action, though simple, reinforced their growing teamwork and trust. They spoke with ease, no longer strangers but two people learning to rely on and respect each other fully. When the work was done, they returned to John's house, tired but content. They prepared a simple dinner together, enjoying the process as much as the meal itself. The atmosphere was warm and relaxed, filled with laughter, stories, and the satisfaction of shared effort. The fire crackled in the hearth, providing both warmth and a comforting background for their conversation. As they ate, Elena reflected on everything she had learned in the past few days. The storm had been frightening, but it had also been a catalyst for change. She had realized that asking for help did not diminish her strength, it enhanced it. She had discovered that working with someone she could trust created a bond that was both meaningful and rewarding. John had not only offered her shelter, but had also shared knowledge, patience, and understanding. John, too, reflected on their shared experiences. He had always valued his independence and the quiet life of a rancher, but he now understood the joy and fulfillment that came from forming genuine connections. Helping Elena had reminded him of the importance of compassion, respect, and trust. He realized that friendship and support were not just luxuries, they were essential for navigating life's challenges, even in a remote and quiet place. As night fell, they sat together by the fire once more, the warmth of the flames filling the room with light and comfort. Outside, the moon rose over the hills, illuminating the ranch in silver light. The peaceful night was a stark contrast to the storm that had begun their connection, highlighting how challenges could transform into opportunities for growth, trust, and friendship. Elena spoke softly, almost to herself. "I'm glad I asked for help. I didn't know it could feel this good to trust someone." John nodded, a gentle smile on his face. "And I'm glad you did. Sometimes it takes courage to accept help, and it's a sign of strength, not weakness." They spent the rest of the evening talking quietly, sharing hopes and dreams for the future. The bond between them had grown stronger, grounded in shared experiences, respect, and mutual understanding. What had begun as a simple offer of shelter had blossomed into something deeper, a connection built on kindness, trust, and friendship. Before going to bed, they stepped outside for a final look at the ranch. The land was calm, bathed in moonlight, and the air was cool and still. They stood in silence for a moment, taking in the beauty of the place and the sense of peace that had returned after the storm. It was a moment of reflection, a recognition that life's challenges could create opportunities for meaningful connections. As they returned indoors, both felt a quiet sense of hope. The storm had tested them, brought them together, and taught valuable lessons about strength, independence, and the importance of trust. They had learned that even the smallest acts of kindness, like offering shelter, could lead to lasting bonds and change lives in ways they had never imagined. Elena settled into her space for the night, feeling safe, appreciated, and understood. She knew that she had found someone she could trust and rely on without fear of judgment. John, too, went to bed with a sense of fulfillment, recognizing that the connections we make, even unexpectedly, are often the most rewarding aspects of life. The days that followed continued in a similar rhythm: work, learning, shared tasks, and conversation, but now with a deeper sense of connection and understanding. The friendship between John and Elena had solidified, built not only on shared experiences, but also on respect, trust, and mutual support. They had learned that life was richer when strength and independence were balanced with compassion and collaboration. As the sun rose on each new day, it brought new opportunities for growth, learning, and shared moments. Both John and Elena embraced the beauty of life on the ranch, knowing that the experiences of the past days had changed them for the better. They had discovered the power of kindness, the importance of trust, and the lasting value of genuine friendship. And so, the story of the rancher and his Apache neighbor reached a heartwarming conclusion. What began as a simple offer of shelter had evolved into a meaningful, lasting connection. Both had grown through their experiences, discovering that vulnerability and strength, independence and support could coexist beautifully. Life on the ranch continued, but now it was filled not only with work and routine, but also with friendship, trust, and the quiet, enduring joy of human connection.